Good morning, everyone. I hope you all had a great Purim. I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Nachshon, who's going to take us on our journey through Amsterdam. Feel free to turn on your cameras so he can see you while he's talking, if you feel like turning them on today. And just so you all know, that will be recorded today and it will be shared at the end of the day, hopefully by the end of the day today. So if you want to reach back and check anything out that Nachshon has shared with us today, please do, or feel free to share it with your friends. It will be on our YouTube page for a couple of weeks. So please enjoy and take it away, Nachshon.
Thank you, Ari, and good evening, everyone. This is Nachshon from Amsterdam. It is 7 p.m. here, and it's so nice to see all of you. You can see some of these things. Actually, I don't know what they're called in English, but my wife made this for me in the whole room because I was elected as a city councillor last week on Purim in Amstelveen, my city. So yeah, thank you. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to be a city councillor from next week. Anyway, I'm going to take you with me on a journey through Amsterdam, a journey of 400 years. We're going to start at the beginning when the Jews came to Amsterdam, and we're going to start today in our beautiful community. I'm going to share my screen with you for our presentation. And here we go. Maybe can I see a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Yes, thank you, Judy. Okay, here we go. Jewish Amsterdam, a small community with a giant history. And I see now, let me see what happened here. I made one especially for Betam. So give me 1 second. What happened here? Here it is. Yes, look, for Temple Betam. This is your presentation. So let's start with a little introduction, some introductory pictures to show you some things what Jewish Amsterdam is about. Perhaps you recognize some of these. Of course, this is where Amsterdam is situated, right here in the Netherlands, next to England, Germany, Belgium. I'm just showing this because I've noticed that a lot of people that follow these lectures don't know exactly where my country is. We have some Jewish politicians here. Of course, this is from the Second World War. This is from a Jewish park. Anne Frank, of course, Jewish theaters, the beautiful Portuguese synagogue, the big Ashkenazi synagogue, our library, and Spinoza, who went viral only a few weeks ago. I'm not sure if you saw that. So I'll tell you a little bit about it later. And let me see if I can even... So we'll come to the next page with some more pictures. The concert hall on the top with the Jewish concerts, a Jewish choir, a barbecue recently on the right, bottom right, a Purim party during COVID, and again the Portuguese synagogue. I think this was the first service after the Second World War. So these are some things we're going to be talking about. And this was just a few days ago in Amsterdam. Big support for Ukraine and some Israeli flags. We have a lot of refugees right now from Ukraine in the Netherlands, and a couple of dozen from the Jewish community there. And they're being, we're taking care of them in some of the hotels owned by Jewish owners just a few blocks away. So before we start, I just want to tell you a few things that I really want you to take away from today's tour, just before I introduce myself. First of all, I'd like you to take from today that Jewish Amsterdam was once the center of the Jewish world. I think it's nice to know. It's something that a lot of people don't realize. Jewish Holland, and I use Holland and the Netherlands interchangeably. Jewish Holland has a very rich cultural and religious tradition. And Jewish Holland is still fighting the effects of the Second World War today. We're still fighting the effects, and we're not sure if we're actually going to overcome these effects. So here's something I want to share with you today. And we're going to speak about how the first Jews came to the Netherlands. I'm going to tell you a bit about what happened to Spinoza. I'm going to tell you how the Dutch Jews influenced the Dutch Republic and the Jewish world in an economic way, political way, and cultural way. Of course, we're going to address the Second World War. We're going to speak about today's Jewish community, perhaps also a bit about anti-Semitism today. And of course, we're going to have a big Q&A, because I've noticed that when we speak about Amsterdam, there's always a lot of questions, and I'm happy to take any questions you have about the Jewish community in Amsterdam. So now I'm going to tell you who is talking to you, my introduction, a little introduction of myself. Here you see me on the left. This is me, 2 years old, pretending to be a chazan. I'm wearing, I was told it's probably a skirt. They said maybe it's a small tablecloth, but it's probably my mom's skirt. Well, I'm 35 years old because I just had a birthday since I created this page. My father is Portuguese Jewish, and we stem from a family that can trace itself back to the Inquisition. So on the right, you see our coat of arms. I have an Ashkenazi mother. My dad's side of the family moved to Holland about 400 years ago, together with many Portuguese Jews. I'm married to Alumit. She's right there in the room. I have a picture of her as well. Here you are. This is us together at our chuppah a few years ago. I was raised in an Orthodox family, but like moderate Orthodox, and I started chazanut, so leading services and teaching at an early age. And I was the regular chazan from 2003 to 2015 in the big Portuguese synagogue. For 12 years, I was, that was my, well, I can say, well, sort of full-time job, although it was situated mostly in the weekends. Then in 2015, I started a new Jewish community called Bendigamos. It was actually sort of a breakaway of that community. And I studied political science. I had a master's in European Union politics. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry, there is some sounds, but it's almost gone. Sorry for that. Okay, it's okay. That was it. Sorry. I started Bendigamos in 2015. I studied political science and I have a master's in European Union politics. As I said, I worked as a city councillor, but just now I became a city councillor again. There was 12 years in between. I also worked at the Israeli embassy, and now I'm working for the Jewish seminary, and I'm a private educator for Jewish stuff and for highly intelligent kids. And I do some other stuff, like create my own prayer books or Haggadot or anything for festivals, chuppot, and yeah, all kinds of Jewish stuff, creating education materials. So yeah, now you have a bit of an idea of what I do. I have no free time. And I'm going to show you a little bit about my family's involvement in Amsterdam. These are some of my family members. I wish I could use annotate, but I can't. I was looking for that. It's disabled. Otherwise, I could use like a little red marker. Anyway, on the left, the top left, you see my cousins. They're from Chabad. My uncle has 11 children, and you see some of them right there. These are my grandparents. If we go to the right, then there's this Hans Rodrigues Pereira, and he was the main rabbi of the Ashkenazi community here. He's the uncle, sorry, he's my great uncle. Then on the right, you see the former chief rabbi of the Portuguese community. He was the uncle of my grandfather. This is my dad, who runs a tax advice company with high-end customers, international. If you ever have some big tax problems, you can send him an email. And on the left, you see my mom here next to the really tall guy. He's the deputy mayor of Amstelveen, where I live, which is basically just a quarter of Amsterdam. It's a suburb officially, but it's all very small. And she does a lot of things. She's like the mother of our community as well. But this is in her, this is like a house where people that have cancer can come for some distraction and some workshops and some support. So there's some of the stuff that brought me here. And now I'm going to show you a short video to introduce you to the Amsterdam Jews. It's gonna go back all the way from Moses in Egypt. So maybe the first 30 seconds, 40 seconds you may know, but then it will take you right to today of how the Jews ended up in Amsterdam. So enjoy the video.
Hoi, ik ben Nachshon. Welkom in de Portugese synagoge, kortweg synagoge genoemd. De synagoge is gebouwd voor Joden die ooit uit Spanje en Portugal naar Amsterdam kwamen. Iedere week leid ik hier de diensten en geef ik les aan Joodse jongeren. Maar wat is Joods? En wat deden die Joden uit Spanje en Portugal eigenlijk in Amsterdam? Kijk, al die mensen op dit schilderij zijn net als ik Joods. Zo'n 3000 jaar geleden woonden onze voorouders aan de oostoever van de Middellandse Zee. Ze daalden wegens een hongersnood af naar Egypte, waar ze als slaven gevangen gehouden werden. Mozes, geboren als kind van slaven en opgegroeid aan het Egyptische hof, bevrijdde zijn volk en leidde het naar de woestijn. Daar krijgt Mozes van God de Torah, het eerste deel van de Hebreeuwse Bijbel, met de 10 geboden. En hij wijst het Joodse volk de weg naar het beloofde land. In Jeruzalem bouwen ze de tempel, een heiligdom voor God en zijn geboden. Maar in het jaar 70 verwoesten de Romeinen de tempel en verdrijven zij de Joden uit het land. Vanaf dat moment verspreiden Joden zich over de hele wereld. Waar ze ook wonen, ze houden zich aan de leefregels van de Torah en komen samen in synagogen. Zo leven Joden ook eeuwenlang in moslim-Spanje. Nadat katholieke koningen daar de macht overnemen, moeten Joden zich bekeren. Wie weigert, kon levend verbrand worden. In 1492 worden alle Joden uit Spanje verdreven. Velen vluchten naar Portugal, waar ze alsnog gedwongen worden gedoopt. Maar ook daar zijn ze als bekeerlingen hun leven niet zeker. Ze vluchten opnieuw, op zoek naar vrijheid. Rond 1600, het begin van de Gouden Eeuw, komen deze bekeerde Joden in Amsterdam aan. Het stadsbestuur van Amsterdam is geïnteresseerd in deze nieuwkomers. Het zijn kooplieden met internationale contacten. Ze mogen blijven. Hier kunnen ze weer als Joden leven. Alleen, hoe doe je dat ook alweer? Er komt een rabbijn naar Amsterdam om hen te helpen. Hij leert hen Hebreeuws, de taal van de Torah, en al snel vinden in zijn huis de eerste Joodse gebedsdiensten plaats. 70 jaar later zou hier de grote Portugese synagoge gebouwd worden.
Okay, here's the video. This is the introduction. And just so you know, just like all these presentations, I'm going to take about 75 minutes for the presentation. Then afterwards, we'll do the question and answers. And of course, this presentation, the video you just saw, was in Dutch. So that's the language that I usually speak.
Hoi.
So the Portuguese synagogue that we spoke about, which is very central to the Jewish community, especially at the beginning, is you can see it here on the right. And here you see it on the left. Now, where you see this nice canal, it's a very big and busy street with cars and everything, but before it was water. And this is a synagogue that I used to be the cantor at for 12 years. And I said I live in Amstelveen officially. It's just 600 miles, sorry, it's not even 1 mile from Amsterdam. It's 0.6 miles away. And I would walk to this synagogue, which is really in the center of Amsterdam. And it would take me 1 hour and a half to go there and 1 hour and a half to walk back, because I walk on Shabbat. I don't take the bike or car or anything. So really, it's not that far away. Amsterdam is not a big city. You can walk anywhere if you just have enough time. So I would walk 3 hours every Shabbat to get to this synagogue. One of the reasons why I started a new community. And this is what it looks like today. This is the big synagogue. Perhaps some of you have seen it. It gets tens of thousands of visitors every year. And on the opposite side, a building that looks a little bit like it, that's the big Ashkenazi synagogue that was built a few years before. It's now the Jewish Museum. It actually houses a couple of synagogues. But yeah, that's the Jewish Museum. Actually, there's not a lot of Jews living in this area anymore. But when the synagogue was built, over 50% of the population in this area was Jewish. So the first Jews in the Netherlands. You heard about this in the video. They came from the Inquisition. They were Spanish and Portuguese Jews. And as I said, some of them went from Spain to Portugal, and then from Portugal to maybe to Italy, and they moved a little bit up. And a lot of them were attracted to the Netherlands, and simply for the reason that in the Netherlands there was some sort of freedom of religion. It was one of the most tolerant places in the world, in the free world at that time. And unless you were a Catholic, you were allowed to have your religion there. There were still a lot of restrictions. It wasn't like the Jews were equal citizens. The synagogues were not allowed to be visible from the street, or at least not have the entrance from the street. And as you can see here, there were a whole bunch of houses and buildings surrounding the synagogue. There was a law. It was not allowed to have it on the street. And in these little houses, you would find some housing, some actual houses. Right today, there's a shop and there's a board members room. You can find the little museum there. This is where they hold services, where they would hold services for burials, and then they would bring the corpse all the way to the other side of town. They would actually have a stable as well, because they needed horses. So that's what happens in the other rooms. Sorry. So I pressed the wrong button. Sorry. Okay. So they were not allowed in guilds or even trade guilds. They were not allowed to be lawyers. They would require them to take an oath that they were not allowed to take. They were not allowed even to be in several cities in the Netherlands, and it depended on personal favors. And until 1789, for example, they were not even allowed to spend a night in a city like Utrecht, which was one of the 4 big cities in the Netherlands. So they were really not equal citizens. And there were actually 3 Portuguese Jewish communities in Amsterdam at the beginning, and they were forced to merge. They were not allowed to have those 3 communities. The municipality of Amsterdam told them they were required to work together. And this has had a huge effect on everything that went on from then on in Amsterdam. You see, the society in Amsterdam, even until a few decades ago, was very pillarized. A pillar means that the Reformed Christians, Portuguese Jews, the Catholics, the Protestants, they were called pillars, and each and every one of them had their own infrastructure, their own media, their own hospitals, their own everything, their own sports clubs, whatever. And also the Portuguese and Ashkenazi Jews, they didn't mix well. They were pillars, a pillarized society. And now, only since a few decades, it's starting to be a bit different. So the Jewish community, they also had to have their own infrastructure. They would have to take care of their own orphans, their own people, they had their own hospital, they had their own everything as well. And they were held responsible for it by the municipality. So what I wanted is that if any Jew would do anything wrong in Amsterdam, they would want to hold accountable one board, the board of the Jewish community. They didn't want to have to talk to this community for this and this for that, and they could say, oh, we don't know this guy. They wanted to have one responsible court. And these board members were not just the board members of the community and of the synagogue, but they were also judges, and they were also the police. And so there was a huge amount of power concentrated in those few board members. And they were given that power in a time when the government was not very kind to many of its people. So you can imagine that by being forced to merge and by giving this power from the municipality, and they were being held responsible for anything. If any Jew would be drunk on the street, or would say something indecent, or would say something blasphemous, the board would be in trouble. And so they would be very strict on their members. And of course, when the Ashkenazi Jews came a bit later, just a few decades later, they came from Eastern Europe, mostly because of pogroms and also because of the economy in the Netherlands was going well. There was freedom of religion, so they also came to Amsterdam. I want to take you to an event that happened on the first Simchat Torah of the Portuguese community. And to get in the right setting, I'm going to show you a little bit of one of the musical pieces that is being performed in the Portuguese synagogue on Simchat Torah. Well, today, unfortunately, there's not many people that can sing this, but if they find someone, then this is from Simchat Torah. Here we go. Just gonna listen for like a minute or so. I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna send you, or Ari is gonna send you afterwards a list with suggested readings and sources, and you will get all the links of all the musical pieces and more that I've been sharing with you tonight. So this is actually a piece that we sing on Simchat Torah in the community, in the Portuguese synagogue. And since women's voices, they wouldn't sing in synagogue, so they would always use men for the high voices. As you can see here, this is an original a song that was written in the 18th century. This is performed only a few years ago in our Amsterdam concert hall for a Hanukkah concert. The first one in this big concert hall since the war, actually, that was which had with an open audience. 1,800 people were there, so that was really big for Amsterdam. But in any case, even when they had actors from Esther, for example, you know the story of Esther from Purim. Only a few years ago, the producers surfaced, and they've been performing it again. And also in the synagogue, they would use men for the female voices. So someone singing like this would perform the role of Esther. And so this was all on Simchat Torah. And what happened was something very interesting. You see, this is on the top right, you see the synagogue from the inside, what it looks like a little bit when it's filled. And on the left, you see a couch, which is in the synagogue, which is just for the groom, the bridegrooms. On Simchat Torah, there's a groom that finishes the reading of the Torah and another groom that starts it again. And they can sit on two of these beautiful benches in the synagogue. And they are being accompanied into the synagogue by like a little parade like this. And usually on Simchat Torah, on this festival, they pick the grooms up at their house and then walk through the city towards the synagogue. So this is what was going on. You see a picture like this, they were walking through the city, and then they were arrested by the police in Amsterdam. And they said, yeah, what are you doing here? And they thought that these were Catholics showing a public display of their faith. And so they explained, well, you see, sir, we are Jews and we're celebrating the Simchat Torah today. And they said, okay, well, Are you going to do a prayer? He said, yeah, we're going to do prayers. Well, can you do a prayer for us as well? Can you say a prayer for us? And this is why, until today, if you look at our prayer for the state, which is said in pretty much every synagogue around the world, it's called Hanoten Teshua. Then in the middle, in Portuguese, we say a prayer not only for the royal family, for the majesty of the lowlands and is and for their spouse, and for the princess, the queen, and for their children, and all the other descendants of the royal house of the Orange Nassau, and all the other members from the government of this country, and for all the nobles, and for the mayor and its deputy mayors of the city of Amsterdam. And it's a prayer we say every time before we read from the Torah. And also still in just in our community, all the Spanish and Portuguese communities, I'll tell you a little bit about that later. They have some of the announcements. When it comes to announcements, not really prayers, but announcements, they are also still in Portuguese. So when we announce at what time the fast starts, or the afternoon prayer, or who the bridegrooms for this year are, this is all still in Portuguese. Nobody understands it anymore, but the announcements are still in Portuguese. So this is like the first century of Jewish presence. In short, how did it develop? In 1602, Bet Yaakov was the first Portuguese synagogue. Can you imagine? It's 420 years ago. It's insane. Then in 1614, the Bet Chaim cemetery, which is where Spinoza's parents are buried, was erected. And this is where also my family is being buried. The cemetery is still active. 1615, Dotar started to hand out dowries to poor children, and they're still doing that today. In 1616, our library of Etz Chaim was started. It's now UNESCO World Heritage, the only library in the Netherlands that's under heritage, UNESCO World Heritage, and it's still in use. So 1616. Then in 1671, the big Ashkenazi synagogue was built, and 4 years later, the Portuguese synagogue was built, and it was modeled after the temple. The first Jews were mostly active in trades, coffee, stock, banking, and this is one of the reasons why the economy in the Netherlands was booming. And the 17th century and 18th century, they were called the Golden Age in the Netherlands because of this. Actually, Spain and Portugal were really doing great economically before that, but once they got rid of the Jews, their economy plummeted, and the Netherlands, they benefited from it. A bit later, the Jews became active in fabric and diamonds and became more active in society. The Jewish population grew very quickly. They were 46,000 in 1830 and 111,000 in 1930. So what happened to Spinoza? Because this is something that a lot of people always wonder about. There are several theories, but the two main theories are: the first one has to do with an economic reason. The parents of Spinoza were builders of ships, and their company it became bankrupt. And since the Parnassim, which is the name of the board, the Parnassim of the community, they also take care of everything. They are also the judges. They also take care of debts. They take care of everything. So they told him what to do with the companies, and they would sort of take over. And they refused to listen to them, and that's why they gave him a ban. It's one of the theories. Actually, the main theory is, as I said, the community was held responsible for everything any Jew would do, and they rightfully realized that what Spinoza was writing and saying was very offensive to the Christian people in the municipality. And because of this reason, they had to give him a ban. By the way, giving bans was very normal at that time. They would give bans on a daily basis for everything. For someone paying their taxes a day too late, they could give a ban. For someone publicly not keeping the Shabbat, they could give bans for anything, and they would do everything to make sure that the Jews would just behave the way they wanted, and they keep them really short. So Spinoza just got a ban like a lot of other people, and he was fine with it, and he decided to go somewhere else, which was difficult in a pillarized society because all those infrastructure is just for you if you're part of that group. So it's difficult to go to a different sports club or a different school or a different anything. So he eventually went abroad. But that's actually probably what happened. The Jewish community, they probably would have been able to deal with him if it was just the Jews, but because they were afraid of what the Christian municipality would say, they decided to give him a permanent ban. A permanent ban that's ended according to Jewish law when he died, but it's not possible to rescind it. It's not possible to rewind it. There was about 8 years ago a big debate in the Netherlands with Rabbi Lopez Cardozo and the rabbi of the community and some other professors discussing whether they should rewind it anyway. And they said, well, you can't, because the rules of the game, according to the rules of the game that banned him, you cannot unban him according to those rules. So it wouldn't make any sense. It doesn't mean anything to do this. And it would be offensive to the community leaders of our community 300 years ago. And also, only a few weeks ago, maybe you've seen this, a big, well-known Jewish professor, Professor Yitzhak Melamed. I'm actually seeing him later tonight. He is in Amsterdam now. He's filming a documentary about Spinoza. And he asked in a kind letter to the community whether he was allowed to film something in the Portuguese synagogue about the life of Spinoza. He's also studying him and his works. And also he asked if perhaps the two rabbis of the community were willing to be interviewed for this documentary. And the rabbi sent a letter back and basically saying that he is a heretic and that he should go to hell. And this caused quite a upheaval, is the word, I think. So Professor Melamed decided to share this letter on his Facebook page, and it was shared on there and Twitter thousands and thousands of times, and it created quite a storm. It led to the Parnasim eventually firing the rabbi, and this only happened a few months ago. So the rabbi is still not accepting his firing, and he's fighting them in court to keep being the rabbi, and it's causing a lot of distress for everyone involved. The community leader said that he is allowed to be in the premises and to be allowed in the synagogue, whereas the rabbi told him he was not allowed even to be at the synagogue or anywhere near to any of the museum parts as well. And because the board publicly went against a rabbinical decree, the community is now facing complete isolation from all the other rabbinates, saying that they cannot go against something the rabbi said, which is actually historically untrue, because the Spanish Portuguese communities actually have a tradition that the board is above what the rabbi says. That's how it's. But anyway, they're having a lot of problems. Just to give you an idea, the big Portuguese community that had over 4,000 families before the war now consists out of under 500 members in total. 2 synagogues totaling about 25 people on Shabbat morning. So it's really not a community anymore that it was before the war. So very unfortunate. And Spinoza hit them hard so long after his death. This is what our cemetery looks like. The cemetery of Beit Chaim. This is where 1614. This is where it all started. On the right, you can see some special graves, including the parents of Spinoza, Samuel Palace, which is, to say it a little bit without nuance, he was a Jewish pirate. Just if you Google him, Samuel Palace, it's very interesting just to see. Some of the very famous rabbis like Menashe ben Israel is buried here. and Yitzhak Abu Abdul Fonseca, which was the first chief rabbi of the biggest synagogue. And if you look at 1312, these are the newer fields, and this is where people are being buried today. It's pretty big. You can just visit it if you're here, and it's actually about 7 miles away from the synagogue. It wasn't allowed to have people buried in Amsterdam at this time, so they had to buy a field in Ouder Kerk, and they would have to walk about 2 hours to get here. So what they would do is, as I said, they had a stable. They use horses to carry the corpse over the water, and that's why this is where they would, at the Waterpoort, this is where they would enter the cemetery. So they would go by boat. The horses would carry the boat, and people would walk or take a carriage, and then they would bury them here. This is what it looks like. On the top left, you see the modern field, and you see some very old tombstones here, and you see that they have symbols on it that you wouldn't expect on a Jewish cemetery, including skulls and everything. And this is probably because they took a lot of symbols with them from Spain and Portugal. This is what they were used to. So you can find actually a lot of these old tombstones with very surprising views. And on the right, bottom right, you see what it looks like from the sky. The cemetery, very peaceful, nice location. As I said, this is Dotar. On the front, you see the chief rabbi Rodrigues Pereira, the uncle of my grandfather, and they would carry lots in these. And even today, every year, just before or after Purim, they will take one of the lots. On it are the names of the young members of the community, and if you're being elected, then you get a higher dowry if you get married. And every of the members of this society gets some extra allowance when they get married, but if your name is taken, then you get more. So that's nice. They still do that. And this is the boardroom of the community, again from the outside. You see they have two symbols. There's the pelican, because it feeds its young, and it stands for the three communities becoming one. And on the right, there's a phoenix, which stands, of course, for the Jewish community, first rising from its ashes after the Inquisition, and then, of course, again after the Second World War. So this is where the Portuguese Jewish community, the first Jewish community in the Netherlands, a very important one, developed. And these are some of their treasures that you can see in the museum. Hundreds of millions worth of treasures that members donated to the community to use. And actually, some of these pieces are still in use. They use them for the Torah, to wash the hands of the Kohanim, the priests. It's really beautiful things. You can find them in the museum of the community. It's really beautiful community. The synagogue itself was the biggest synagogue in the world for 200 years, and it has 1,600 seats. The wood of the Aron HaKodesh, you see, it's a really big ark which held 72 scrolls, and it was made from wood from Brazil. Also, the benches, they came all from Brazil. It was the best wood they could find at the time. And the entrance, if you look at the fifth word, it says this is the year in which the synagogue was erected, but here the name of the first chief rabbi, Abu Ab, is hidden. He was the first chief rabbi. Now, does any one of you, did you hear about Shabbatai Tzvi, the false Messiah? He was in Amsterdam, and he claimed that he was the Messiah. And because people believe, a lot of people actually sort of believed him, and they prepared to go to Israel to celebrate the end of the world, or the beginning of the new world. And he didn't turn out to be the Messiah. He turned out to just be a fake, and people sort of realized that after he converted to Islam. But a lot of people already sold their houses and bought tickets to boats to Israel, etc. And as a result, like half of the synagogue of the community was following him, and the other half wasn't. Shabbatai Tzvi was a big fan of Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism, and some of the prayers in synagogues are derived from Kabbalah. So because of this, several Kabbalistic traditions have been banned from the Portuguese synagogue, which makes the synagogue service a little bit different than in Eastern Europe. But there was another thing which is relevant, which is that the Jews there that time believed that the Mashiach, that the Savior, was going to come soon. And they thought it would come faster if the Jews were dispersed over the whole world. If they would have Jewish communities all over the world, then the Mashiach would come faster. And this is why the community in Amsterdam decided to create new communities like them with similar buildings and similar traditions in different places in the world. So the Portuguese Jews went to Brazil already in the first half of the 17th century. And this first chief rabbi, Rabbi Yitzhak Abu Abda Fonseca, he started the first synagogue in the Americas. The first synagogue in the Americas was in Brazil, in Recife. And let me see, we'll see it in a bit. Here, I'll show it now. This is the first synagogue in the Americas, Kahotzri Israel, in Recife. And they established synagogues here. This is the one in New York on the left, and on the right in London. They all look similar, the same with the wood and the bima, or the teva as we call it, the place where the prayers are led at the beginning of the synagogue, and the cantor singing over the heads, and the chairs looking towards each other so you can see everything well. And the candeliers. And also here in the Caribbean, there are several synagogues just like this, the Spanish Portuguese synagogues. There are about 30 synagogues like this in the world. About half of them are still active. And they arrived from Amsterdam again after the Inquisition. So they established all these synagogues over the world, hoping that the Mashiach would come faster. Now, the library that I told you about, you can see it looks really beautiful. You can still visit it if you make an appointment in advance. It has over 30,000 printed books and over 500 manuscripts. And now it's a library, but at this time in the 17th century, it was a Torah school. And it was known for the best education at the time, and it brought forth many famous rabbis. And it doesn't just have Jewish books, but it also has secular books about math, shipbuilding, history, etc. In many different languages. About 65% is in Hebrew. There are Bible works, there are legal works, there's some Christian works. All areas of human knowledge you can find in this library, which was very special. Amsterdam was also the center of the free press. So a lot of important works were, for the first time, they were printed in Amsterdam. One of them is the very well-known Amsterdam Haggadah. So you can see some of the manuscripts here, Haggadah for Pesach. If you want to see these manuscripts yourself, you can go to the website of Etz Chaim, and you can view pretty much all of these manuscripts online. It's very special. It's a very special library. So yeah, this is part of. So you can see the community had the biggest synagogue in the world. It had a very famous Torah school. So many important works were printed in Amsterdam. So yeah, the 17th century was very. Amsterdam was just the center of the Jewish world at that time. Let me see how. Just a second. I see that my battery is getting a bit low, so I'm going to fix that soon. But first, we'll continue the presentation until we get to the next video, and then I'll plug it in. Let me see where we were here. So some famous rabbis from the Netherlands. I spoke to you about Yitzhak Abu Abdel Fonseca. Tzvi Ashkenazi was a very famous rabbi. You may or not may have heard of him, Ashkenazi rabbi. And there's Menashe ben Yisrael, who was really one of the first, and he taught the Jews that didn't know anymore how to be Jewish. Some of them, of course, many of them had some traditions, but they were not allowed really to study the Torah or to read Hebrew. And Menashe ben Yisrael, he did pretty much everything. He established contacts with governments. He made it possible for the Jews. He helped them to be allowed into England again, because for a long time, Jews were not even allowed to be in England. And he was a mohel. He was able to do circumcisions. So he really brought back a lot of Jewish life to the Netherlands. These I showed you. I told you what happened to Spinoza. So these were basically the first 200 years of Jewish presence in Amsterdam. Now, if we go to the year 1850, 1870, in the meantime, not much happened. You see that the Jewish community was very poor, just like most of the community, of course, most of the Netherlands, but also the Jewish community was poor. Of course, also before, there were just about 5 or 10% of the families were rich, but they were able to provide for the rest. But in this century, people were very poor. And then a new time began with the diamonds and the trade unions. Diamond processing became very popular, and more Jews started to work in this business. It didn't pay well, and because of this, the Jews started to organize themselves, and they started trade unions. These were really the first trade unions in Western Europe. Jewish men, you probably don't know the names, but Henry Polak, Sam de Wolf, Mono de Miranda, they led the way. And in that time, Jews became more visible. They started to get more rights. They became sort of equal. They were allowed to vote. They were allowed into other places of society. They became visible in theaters, sports, in politics. And today, if you walk through Amsterdam, many dozens of street names and buildings are named after the Jews that were active in this time in the city. And the trade unions led to the establishment of the Dutch Labour Party, one of the main big political parties in the Netherlands, which still exists today and still has a following of Jews. Unfortunately, they became a bit anti-Israel lately, but originally they were founded by the Jewish trade unions. Then a few decades later, in the 1900s, even though a lot of Jews remained in poverty, just like most of society, there were some other interesting developments. On the picture, you see Aletta Jacobs. She's one of the first famous Dutch Jewish women. She was the first student, the first female student to study in university. And she was the first woman to graduate for a doctor's degree at university. And she fought for women's suffrage. She started the first feministic wave. Suffrage is the right to vote. And in 1917, the women were allowed to vote for the first time in the Netherlands. I think it's pretty much around that time for most Western countries, except for Switzerland, which for whatever reason, they didn't allow women to vote until 1970, like 70, Switzerland. Yeah, I know, right? the large amount of Dutch Jews in the Netherlands greatly influenced the Dutch language with many Yiddish words. You see, there were, as I said earlier, over 100,000 Jews around 1900, and the population in the Netherlands was about 5 million. The Jews made up 25% of Amsterdam and 50% of some areas, so they influenced the Dutch language a lot. I have a book with thousands of words deriving from Yiddish and Hebrew that were influencing the Netherlands. And as I said, the Portuguese community had 4,000 families, so that means by this time, 80-something% of all the Jews were Ashkenazi, maybe more, 90% was Ashkenazi. So I'm going to show you a list. Have a look at it for 30 seconds, and I'll plug in my battery of the laptop, and I'll tell you a bit more about this. Okay, there we go. So in the first column, you see what the Dutch word means. Then you see the words that we use in Dutch, the Yiddish root, the Hebrew root, modern Hebrew, and the meaning of it. These are just some of many words that are still being used by people, not just in Amsterdam, but everywhere. I want to mention a few ones in particular. For example, the word chaber is really just a very common word, which means friend, from chaver. And I'm going to go to the next. Oh, here, cheers. In Dutch, it says daar ga je, and it's derived from l'chaim. You know, to life, l'chaim. It doesn't really sound like daar ga je. Daar ga je in Dutch means there you go. And it's just because when they heard the Jews say l'chaim, they just thought it sounded like daar ga je. So that's why that became l'chaim, daar ga je. And here is another part of a list, but as I said, there are thousands of words. Many of them are still in use here in Holland. And in fact, only a few cities in the world have more than one name for it. Amsterdam is one of them. One of the common names for Amsterdam is Mokum. Comes from city, Makom in Hebrew. Really, one of the main names of Amsterdam is Mokum, which is, I think it's nice to know. And yeah, a Meijer, this is the main name for a $100 bill or €100 bill is a Meijer from Mea, 100. Lev also from Lev, heart, is a very common name. These are usually the main words people go to if they want to say something like this. So as you can see, the Jewish influence was really big also when it comes to language. Then if you look at politics, I'm going to show you a few. This is Samuel Sarfati. And this is his park, the Sarfati Park, in his bust. He was a Portuguese Jewish doctor, a chemist, a philanthropist, and a baker. Like a lot of people in those ages, they didn't have just one profession, but like 100. Some of the things he did was he reformed education, healthcare, the city development, and business in Amsterdam and Holland. By the way, the Netherlands has 12 provinces. 2 of them are called Holland, North Holland and South Holland. And so when people speak about Holland, they usually mean the whole country because these were the 2 main provinces. So that's why usually we say Holland or the Netherlands and we use it in the same way. But technically, the Netherlands is a whole country and Holland refers to the 2 main provinces. But they are used as a parspototo. They are used as referring to the whole country. Now about an Ashkenazi Jew, because of course there has been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of influential Jews in the Netherlands. This was only recently named the number one theater in the world by Time Out magazine. Abraham Tuschinski. This is a beautiful theater that he created, which is still in use about 100 years ago. And he was murdered during the Second World War. This is one of the theaters you can visit in Amsterdam. Now it's time for the video. I'm going to show you 1 minute of the beginning and 1 minute of the end. And this will give you an idea of the atmosphere of the Jewish quarters close to surrounding the synagogue in the 1930s. That's where we are now. We're now in the 1930s. You will see there's a lot of stores and shops carrying Jewish last names, being owned by Jews. And the street name is the Jodenbreestraat, which means the Jewish Broadway. This is a street next to the big synagogue that you saw. Let's have a look.
Is this the little girl I care?
Let's skip a little bit. This is Friday night, by the way.
In store for me.
Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, sweet sleep by the years. One season following another, laden with happiness and
Incredible, right? Footage from 90 years ago. I think that you're feeling like you're in Amsterdam today with me. And you can see this is a really long time ago because people were not socially distancing yet. We're going to go to the Second World War. I don't want to talk about it too much because everybody knows enough about it, but perhaps there are some questions. So, of course, you know about Anne Frank. It all happened a few miles away from here. You know about the atrocities. You probably know that 80% of the Dutch Jewish population was murdered. And this was a very high percentage, the second highest percentage in the whole of Europe. And this is partly because the German Nazi ideology just went very well with the Dutch people here. They adopted it very easily. Secondly, because they are pragmatic and they don't really care about people that are different. It's just they care about economy. So for the same reason, the Jews were very welcome when they brought the economy to the Netherlands. It was also very easy to dispose them when it wasn't good for them anymore. And the third reason is the Jews were the Dutch people are very well organized. They still are. And because of the good organization, everything was registered and they could very easily find the Jews wherever they are. And there's something called the Actie Portuguesa. Actually, the Portuguese Jews there was a higher percentage of them being killed eventually. It's because they tried to use they tried to use some sort of list, a trick. Of course, the Germans, they had this idea about race, and that if you were not Aryan or you were they wanted to deport you. And the Portuguese Jews said, well, you know, we are not the same as Ashkenazi Jews because we are from Spain and Portugal, so we are actually a different race. They already knew they were going to be killed, so they thought, you know, we may as well try something. It was called the Actie Portuguesa. On the right, you see that they made all these portraits, and they had someone like measure all of their body parts, like everyone they were doing anyway. It was a science, like measuring skulls and such. And they made an argument that they were not from the Jewish race according to their theories. And until 1944, it held, until it came to one of the generals that said they are all Jewish filth, and then they were deported anyway. And because they sort of hoped for a good result, it may be that actually a higher percentage of them was killed eventually. But for a year and a half, it seemed like it was going to work. Of course, they didn't believe in it, but they thought that it was worth giving it a try. How did my grandparents survive the war? From my dad's side, my grandfather was hiding in the south of the Netherlands, and my grandmother had a fake passport, and she was able to sort of stay in Harderwijk in the middle of the Netherlands, and just hide most of the time. But sometimes she would go outside, even though she was almost arrested twice. But with a fake passport, she was able to sort of go through it sort of easily. On my mom's side, they had a British passport. I don't really know why. And they were working for Philips, an international company, and they were taking really good care of their workers. So at the camp, they sort of had a protected status. They were in camps, My grandfather was in Bergen-Belsen. For his bar mitzvah, which was in the camps, his bar mitzvah present was 2 cigars or cigarettes, I think, 2 cigarettes. He's still alive. He's 90. He just celebrated his 90th birthday. And my other grandmother is also alive. She's 99. The other two passed away. And unfortunately, towards the end of the war, they were deported to Auschwitz. They were put on the train. And it was a few days before the war. They didn't know that at that time, but they had some rumors. And everything they still had left, everybody together in the train, they collected everything they had that had some worth, and they bribed the driver of the train, and they told him to go as slow as he could. And they gave him just enough for him to do that. And because he drove the train so slowly, the war had ended before they reached Auschwitz. And that's why I'm still here. Well, you've seen the pictures. Before the war, the Jewish community wasn't just in Amsterdam. All of these blue points, indicators, show a place where there was a Jewish community. Amsterdam had the biggest, of course, but about 40% of the Jews lived outside of Amsterdam. It's still the same. And if you go to the website, which is part of the suggested links and further reading, you can click on all of these blue things, and you can see how many Jews there were in 1830, in 1815, 1870, etc. And after the war, most of these communities were completely annihilated, and there were still some Jews left, but either they stayed to take care of the cemetery, or they had to leave at some point because there was not enough anymore to really have a community. Right now, there's basically just Amsterdam. There are sort of, well, things you can call community in maybe 3 or 4 other cities, and the rest have like very, very low amount of Jews. And once in a while, there is a small service just for the people that live nearby, but you cannot really speak of like a community. So now I want to talk to you about the years after the war for the last like 5-6 minutes. The years after the war were not much better for many Dutch Jews. They were still fighting. They're still fighting for justice, but they were fighting for justice back then. For example, the railroads. They gave money back only recently, only a few years ago, because the Jews that were deported to Eastern Europe, they had to pay their own tickets, and they're giving back some of that now to the descendants of these people, the people themselves. Ground lease. The city of Amsterdam and many other cities, they would send a fine to the Jews that came back from the camps for unpaid taxes during their absence. Only recently, the municipality gave back some of the money to the community after this, and also other cities are doing that now. Art, of course, when people came back, there was no psychological support. They are often stateless. Their passports were taken away, their houses were taken away, and of course, a lot of their like art, for example, it was stolen. And even today, they are still fighting to get some of that art back. Some of it is owned by the Dutch government or by the Dutch royal family, and it's still, or by museums, and it's still difficult to get the art back. Of course, there was still anti-Semitism. It doesn't mean that in 1945 the war ends, that suddenly everybody likes Jews. But there was also some positive change, and of course, I mean, a lot of people just didn't want to have to do anything with Judaism anymore. They lost faith in God. They were too afraid. They didn't want to tell their children they were Jewish. A lot of them were infertile because of the medical experiments. A lot of people just decided to move away from the Netherlands. But the people that stayed, they felt like they need to do something to protect themselves, so they became more active in society. So in Amsterdam, we had a lot of political Jews, a lot of Jewish mayors we've had, and Jewish politicians also later. But of course, the mindset of the Jews in the Netherlands was very different. And even today, you could say we're in a post-war mindset. The socioeconomic trends, there are this is 10 years ago, but it's still more or less the same. It doesn't grow. 37,000 people are halachically Jewish with a Jewish mother, and another 15,000 with a Jewish father. 4% considers himself Orthodox. And look at this, 80%, it's a bit higher now, is not affiliated with any Jewish organization. 80% is not affiliated with any Jewish organization. And still 52% of the Jews lives outside Amsterdam. Out of this number, 20% came from Israel. They are expats. So 120,000 Jews before the war, then about 100,000 were killed. So we are not much bigger now than we were after the war. It's not growing. Also, we know that 85% of the young generation will come home with a non-Jewish partner. So it really doesn't look so good. The current infrastructure in Amsterdam, we have 15 active synagogues, but on average, we have 500 people in a synagogue on Shabbat morning. So it's not very big. 2 day schools, a kollel, 10 rabbis, a handful of kosher restaurants, kosher shops. We have a sports club, a student housing, all kinds of social, cultural, and religious communities, an Israeli community, and youth movements. So on paper, also in practice, you can have a nice Jewish life in Amsterdam. Everything you really need is here. It may be a bit difficult to find a partner. It actually is really difficult, but generally, we still have an infrastructure. And there are some new initiatives. We have some new synagogues, and there's Beni Gamos, which is a spin-off of the Esnoga. It's my community that I told you about. And we pretty much started from scratch. Our goals are to keep the traditions up, to make the community grow again, bringing Jewish people together, and to be just more than just a religion, but really to build a community with a wide range of events. Because as I said, the mindset of the community is a post-war mindset. So most of the community leaders that are a bit older, that are second generation, they usually were raised in an environment which was a bit toxic, understandably toxic. They were not often, their parents were often not emotionally available. And for them, like if they go to a synagogue, they see what's not there anymore. I like my great aunt, she goes to the Portuguese synagogue and she says, oh, this is where my brother used to sit. This is where my uncle used to sit. They don't have the mental power to look forward and to build something new, because it's just too painful. And really only now, over 70 years later, the new generation feels like we need perspective. We want to look forward. We want our story to have its main part in the future, not in the past anymore. But the people that are still in charge, they don't allow room for that. And this is a main reason why we started a new community, because we really need to have a fresh virtual environment where we can look forward. And we really have to, because as I said, we're struggling with the effects of the war. We are losing our critical mass and we're going below what we need in order just to keep, to stay alive. And so we're working really, really hard to revive the community. I'm going to show you, to end, a few pictures of my synagogue, and then we're exactly 70 minutes. And then I'm going to give you the floor to ask any questions you like. During COVID, we had social distancing synagogue in the backyard for ventilation. On the right, you see some of my private students during a sushi workshop. And this is our Lag Omer barbecue in the COVID Purim. This is what our synagogue building that we rent looked like before COVID. Another Purim party at a boat. One of my bar mitzvah students. I teach about 15 of them every year. A little bit of Yom Kippur during COVID, so outside. This shows you a little bit what it looked like. We had a maximum of 50 people. Of course, this was after Yom Kippur ended. It was during the Havdalah. And our average age, by the way, we have on Shabbat morning, we started from scratch 6 years ago. We have an average of 100 people on Shabbat morning with an average age of 30, which makes us the second synagogue in the country already, and the youngest, of course. This is from a few weeks ago, our Hanukkah party, the COVID-friendly, and a Hanukkah workshop for kids where they make their own Hanukkah. And a ping pong tournament we did. Once in a while, we have teenagers learning together to prepare to lead part of the services. On Yom Kippur, we have teenagers take part of the service. And this year, we expect 15 teenagers to do that together. And this is our Rosh Hashanah picnic. We had 130 people there. And I want to show you one thing. I couldn't put it in the presentation, but right here, I wanted to show you let me see, it should be here, the latest, the Purim party. It's here. This was just a few days back. This is me as Asterix. I don't know if you know Asterix. This was our, this is Karma. This is my wife made him. He's also, some pictures of her Purim party. And then the final page of our presentation. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions. And of course, you are free to follow me or contact me or see what we do. This is our Facebook group, my email, and my Patreon that we started a few days ago. And basically, just before I start the questions, just a very short summary. As I said, the Netherlands was really the center of the Jewish world for a long time. We had the biggest synagogue. We had a very wealthy, big, growing community, the biggest rabbis. They had an international outreach. Then also economically, politically, socially, language, there was a huge influence of the Dutch Jews to Amsterdam. Then the Second World War wiped out 80 to 90% of the community. And today we're still struggling just to deal with the effects of that. And there are some communities among ours that are really trying to revive at least part of the old glory. And I'm happy that I could tell you a little bit about our beautiful community today. And I hope to see some of you perhaps in Amsterdam in the future. And if you do, I'd be happy to show you around. Thank you for your time.
I just want to open it up to anyone who has any questions. Feel free to either raise your hand or you can raise your hand virtually. And we'll start with Judy.
Hi, Nachshon. That was such a great presentation. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. I wanted to ask you, did you start this new community yourself with a small group? How did it start?
Yes. So as I said, in 2005, I was the cantor for the Portuguese synagogue. So for 12 years, I was already sort of leading the synagogue there. And I could see that, as I said, because of the post-war mentality, it was really difficult there to grow something. To give an example, we had just like before the war, the board members still feel like they have a lot of power, and they're treating people like they are higher than other people, and they are making people feel very unwelcome. So they make a lot of fights. And at some point I had 20 students, and 1 year later, only half of them was still a member because the board had made fights with them. So at some point I just realized that if I want to have a good future for, a community where my children can still be, we need something else, because it was just going down and it wasn't possible to change it from within. So that's why literally myself just started a community by myself. I had some people from the community, like together, I spoke to them, like, do you think it's a good idea? But basically I just started from scratch 6.5 years ago, and it's going really well.
Thank you.
Susan, go ahead. Just unmute yourself, please.
I'm also looking
Right.
at.
So that was Nachshon. That was a wonderful presentation. My husband and I love being in the Netherlands. We've done home exchanges in Meppel and in Utrecht, and we stayed in Amsterdam, and we really love it. It was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I'm so glad that you anyway, you're obviously an important Jewish leader. We're really terrific. I'm wondering, your community wasn't there when we were in Amsterdam. We went to the Reform Synagogue right after they had built the new building, which is really beautiful. And I'm hoping that there is some congenial interchange among there's not a Masorti synagogue in Amsterdam, is there? I'm not.
No, that's right. It's not Masorti.
Yeah.
That's right. It also has to do with
is a little slower, but with the Reform community, do you have some interchange?
Yes, absolutely. I want to say two things. First of all, I had a little bit more trouble finding words tonight because, as I said last week, I had the election. I had 2 Purim parties and doing a full-time campaign and a fast day. So just my brain, I'm still really tired from everything. But just so I wanted to say that. The other thing is, the previous generations were mostly excluding people. I hear some sound, by the way. I'm not sure where it's coming from. They were very exclusive, not just between progressive Jews and less progressive Jews, but basically, if you were from a different city or from a different family, or you were making less money, or you were less Orthodox, like there were always ways to make people feel like they didn't belong there. And this is something that our new generation doesn't want to. We just feel like we are not just a religion, we are people. We're the Jewish people, and we want to bring people together. And we understand that when it comes to religion or Jewish law, you cannot completely do everything in the same way, but it doesn't mean you have to treat people like they are like your enemy or something. So we try to work together with any other positive-minded Jewish organization. And I think we can list 20 Jewish organizations already that we have positive, working together with, we're a very central community already in here, and we have good contacts with them as well. Not on the religious level, but definitely like socially, historically, politically, all these things. We want to be open. We don't feel like we need to isolate ourselves anymore. We're not afraid. We are very proud of our community, and we like to show it to other people and to work together where we can to make the Jewish people stronger. Any other questions? Feel free to ask anything you like. As you can tell by now, I'm a very open person, so you don't have to watch your words. You can ask anything. Raise hands.
Looks like we
I had a question at the very beginning. Netherlands or Holland? What's the preferred name of the country, and why are there 2 names?
Okay, so I saw this question in the chat. I'm looking at the chat as well. Thank you for everyone's remarks. So I said they're basically used interchangeably. The official name is the Netherlands, but Holland refers to the 2 main provinces, part of the 12 provinces of the Netherlands. So when we use Holland, it literally means those 2 provinces, but actually it refers to the whole country. So really we use it interchangeably. Usually, sometimes we just say Holland because it's shorter than the Netherlands. The official name is the Netherlands, but it's really both. It's both fine. And its language is Dutch, which is very confusing. I see Elisa raising her hand.
Yes, hi, and thank you, Nachshon. This has been fantastic. I'm curious. Europe is not a very welcoming environment to Israel. I mean, there's a lot of obviously anti-Israel activity and the like. And so you mentioned that there's a pretty substantial Israeli community in Holland, and I'm wondering what the relationship is between the Dutch Jewish community and Israel, and whether it's kind of hard to be a vocal supporter of Israel in the current.
The Dutch Jews generally are very supportive of Israel. Really, I cannot say anything else. They're supportive. They are vocally supportive. Some of them are also critical, but without being supportive. Just like you can be critical of your local or your national government, you can be critical. But to work like outside, like they usually keep their criticism inside, if we're lucky, generally. But they're supportive of Israel. We have a strong pro-Israel lobby group or several groups, and pro-Israel demonstrations and all these things. And we're supporting Israel in a clear way, and it's okay. It's like we're not having that much issues with it. Most of the anti-Semitism in the Netherlands comes not from the right wing. Mostly, it's actually from Muslim side in the Netherlands. Most of the Jews live in areas where they live in sort of a bubble, so they can live freely. But when they go to schools with a lot of people that are not from the Netherlands originally, but from Eastern European countries, from Mediterranean countries or Arab countries, they see that they often get they have a lot of issues to be there freely. Often they're not able to say they're Jewish, and if they do, they have a very difficult time. So that's why the Jews mostly they just cluster in certain good areas, and in those good areas, life is pretty good. And
question.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to ask another question here?
Yeah, you can. If you give me 1 second, I saw in the chat, Mira Pfeffer, I hope I say it right, that they were in the Great Synagogue on Shabbat in the 80s, and that they were surprised by the lack of friendliness or interest in them when they were greeted. And this is exactly what I mean. The community in the Netherlands has been very closed, and in the rabbinical world, they are known for being a very difficult country. And I think it's heartbreaking. I've heard and seen so many stories of people being treated like crap, sometimes on purpose, sometimes just for whatever reasons. And as I said, the war and the effects are usually the reason why, not always, but they are part of the reason why. But the truth is that this is the main reason why 85% of the Jews are not even affiliated with any Jewish organization. And this is really our main goal, to give healing to these people and to bring them back, and to offer an environment where people can feel accepted and welcome and heard and seen. And this is why we are growing. This is the main reason why we're growing so fast. And I know we can grow to 300 or 400 people a week if we just continue doing this. And we just need a little bit more time and some more space and some more means, and then we can do that. We already know these people, and there's many more. It's just there's so much hurt has been done to them. So yeah, I recognize it. I've seen people, very nice, kind people. They go to synagogue and nobody even says Shabbat Shalom to them. It's insane. But I know this is the case, and this is why we're making the exact opposite. And it's really beautiful to do that, and it gives me just so much pleasure and joy to see finally turning this around. You had another question, Alisa.
Yeah, in a way, you kind of just answered it.
Oh.
But I know several folks, including within my family, who married into my family, people who were hidden during the war, Jews, and then after, when they survived, really rejected anything having to do with their Judaism. And I'm just was curious whether your new community and with all the community building that you're doing, whether you're finding people who are trying to learn about themselves and their families, despite the fact that their parents or grandparents might have rejected that, and whether, they're finding you because they want to know more about their roots.
Yes, absolutely. We have that. And in order for us to be completely successful, we need to have a full, how do you say it, like, services that comes with the religious organization. That means that eventually you want people to be able to all the phases in life, from birth and circumcision and weddings and burials. We want to be able to offer that. For now, we are dependent from the main communities. They are still offering that, the main Ashkenazi one and the main Sephardi one, but people are completely fed up with the way they're treated by them, and also the internal politics. Even if you can find it even in the national newspapers, the way they fight each other is horrible, and it's really bringing people away. So actually what we want to do eventually is to have our own big community building with everything, and to be able to give all these things so people we don't have to go through these organizations anymore. And I think this can really grow the community again. What we see now is that people find their way back to us, and we offer an environment where they can safely and in their own speed and without judgment, we take them and help them develop and explore and celebrate their Jewish identity in a way that's nice convenient for them. And anything they want to learn, we offer it to them. And if they don't want to learn anything, it's also fine. It's just very, very easy, very informal, and they love it. But we know we can do much more. If I was able to have my own, if I would have my own rabbinates, then the first thing we would do, I don't know why they didn't do it. I do know why, because they are very afraid. Look, if only 10% of your community is left and you're a synagogue with 20 people, you're afraid to bring people in, because if you just bring 10 people in, it can change everything, especially if you don't have much emotional or social skills. So they try to keep everyone out, just to try to grab onto the little bit of Judaism of their community they had left, and that they had left from before the war. So I understand that, but we have so many more tools and ways to get people involved and make them part of our community instead of seeing them as a threat. So what I would do is really to just make how do you say, like let's say a company, it's not a company, but like a company or committee that's basically saying, listen, every Jew in the Netherlands, or everyone who has a Jewish father or Jewish grandparent, Jewish anything, if you feel Jewish and you want to go back to the community, and the reason you're not halachically Jewish is because of the war, come to us, and we're gonna see what we can do. And if we, I mean, this is what we call in Judaism pikuach nefesh. Nobody there. This was done to us to the Germans. If we can get anyone back, at least the ones that already want to be part of the community and that should be part of the community, I'm sure that we can do something about it. Maybe they need to convert, but we can offer them a more easy conversion and a mass conversion or whatever. But I think that's the first thing you should do after something like this happens, to say, you know what, we're going to collect everyone that was lost and wants to go back. It's the first thing we should do. And even now, 72 years later, it hasn't began. 77 years later. So that's really one of the things I would do. And there should be thousands and thousands of Jews waiting for this in the Netherlands.
Thanks.
Do we have any more questions? Great. Well, Nachshon, I want to thank you so much. This was a very informative session. I really appreciate it. And I've gotten several comments as well, just thanking me for getting you, and I take zero credit because Kesher found you, and I'm glad that they did, because this was a great session. We did record this today, so it will be available. Nachshon's going to send me a lot of his resources, so I'll make sure to put that out as well, for anyone who wants to peruse through them. And again, thank you so much. Just a reminder that our next program is going to be on April 11th, Monday evening at 6 p.m. on Bulgaria, to get everyone really excited about our potential trip to the Balkans next year, which I am currently working on an itinerary for. So again, Nachshon, thank you so much for your time and your presentation. And thank you everyone who joined us today, and we will see you next month.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing.
Yes.
Please. I think that the name Nachshon is very symbolic to the history of the Jews, because Nachshon, according to the Torah, was the first one who dared to go into the water when when the children of Israel had to cross the sea, the Nile. So that's kind of the same thing that Nachshon of the present try to do something that nobody before has to do, dare to do.
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Yeah, that's Nachshon. That's right. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day and a great night.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.